Welcome to the Grace Story Podcast, where inspiring stories are brought to life. This podcast is made possible by Grace College and Seminary, located on the shores of Winona Lake in the great state of Indiana. I'm your host, Dr. Drew Flam. This is the Grace Story Podcast. Today on the podcast, we have the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Professor of Education at Grace College, Dr. Laurie Owen. Dr. Owen received her bachelor's degree from Eastern Illinois University, her master's from Ball State University, and her PhD from Walden University. She has accrued nearly 20 years of experience at Grace, including 10 as the Dean of the School of Education, prior to being named Vice President of Academic Affairs. Dr. Owen continues her oversights of policies and programs for undergraduate and graduate academics and serves as the coordinator for work, assessment, and development in these areas. And she says her chief priority is to design and implement effective faculty development opportunities, which maybe we'll figure out what that means in this podcast. So, Dr. Owen, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We just had a very fun discussion prior to this about flexibility, and I did not know that one of your special gifts is flexibility.
Totally. It is one of my special gifts.
And, probably not just flexibility in the sense of being able to stretch, but that has probably proven true in just how you operate in your life. As I have seen you, you are very flexible in how you deal with people and how you deal with situations, kind of go with the flow.
Comes with a short attention span.
Oh, is that what it is? Has that been the case? I mean, would you say that's a true thing since?
Yes,
really?
Forever. Yeah. And
Okay.
I think it's because when you have the attention span I have and the energy level, you can't stay focused on anything very long. So you have to train yourself how to use that wisely instead of just get in trouble.
Were you that way as a kid, as a child?
I was, very much
How did
so.
that affect, you're in education, so how did that affect your kind of childhood education?
Well, I was not a stellar student by any means. I would say that as far as learning, it was so different then, right? I mean, parents were kind of okay with you being an average student. And I think that's one of the battles we face now is not everybody is perfect in everything, and that needs to be okay. So I didn't have a lot of pressure, even though my family were educators. As long as I made it to the next grade without too many trips to the principal's office, I was okay.
Where did you grow up? And tell me a little bit about your family.
I grew up in Anderson, Indiana. That's where I spent my elementary years. So they're all from that area, business owners. My extended families in Arkansas, but we landed in Anderson, and we were Lakers here. My grandparents had 3 businesses in North Webster that were very tourist connected. So we got a cottage and we started visiting this area. So eventually I moved here, and I was actually a Wawasee high school grad a few years ago.
Interesting.
And then I went to Illinois from there.
When you went to Eastern Illinois, did you know I'm going the road of education, I want to be a teacher, etc.?
I actually started at Ball State in the education program, and I completed 3 years there. And then Illinois licensed differently, so by going to Eastern Illinois and finishing with a professor that I had met through family friends, I switched there. My license was much more diverse by graduating in the state of Illinois.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I really just did upper level courses in student teaching in Illinois. The rest of it happened at Ball State.
Did you immediately go into teaching then after graduating?
No, I did not. I was going to be a pediatrician. I think that's what I told everybody. You know, when you're a senior and you have to do all those homecoming things, you want to sound really excited. So I was actually very interested in pediatrics. I still just love children. And so to me, that was like the ultimate way to get to spend time. I was not prepared for the dark side or the sadder moments of that career. So I will say that mentors did a really nice job teaching me that quickly. That probably wasn't my avenue. My family was all teachers, so I was never going to be a teacher.
Gotcha. I was the same boat. My parents are both teachers, and I swore off education in 3rd grade, and I guess I've never been truly a teacher, but I have definitely been in the world of education regardless. No how much you fight it, right?
Right.
So when
genetic.
When you had your first teaching job, what grade level was it?
My first teaching job was 2nd grade. At Leesburg Elementary. I was subbing in the Wawasee system, but I ended up with a full-time job at Leesburg, and I was there for many years. Most of my time there was in kindergarten, but I started in 2nd grade.
Is that the lower elementary always been your favorite?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. I guess I was a little bit afraid of what I might say or do to a 6th grader who was misbehaving. Kindergarten, they felt so innocent for a while, but no, I still love I teach 4-year-olds now. That's just kind of where I get my energy from, is that age group. Yeah.
So at some point in time, you moved then more into the administration, even at the K-12 level. How did that come about? How did you say, you know what, I love kindergartners, but maybe I could be a principal?
Oh no, I was a classroom teacher
All the way through?
all the way through. Oh,
until you came to Grace?
Until I came to Grace.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was. No, I didn't have, my first administrative role was when they asked me if I would be the dean here on campus. So it was not something that I had a great deal of passion for or interest in. I loved teaching. So that I taught for 20, that tells you how old I am, 20 years in the public school system. And then I've been at Grace teaching another 20. So yeah, I loved teaching.
So tell us a little bit about that transition to Grace.
Okay.
How did you decide, you know what, I'm going to make this leap from kindergartners to college students?
It was very unexpected. I still remember, I'm a very visual person, so I remember the outfit I had on when I was invited to come to Grace. I had Grace student teachers in my classroom and Grace students coming into the room. So I had met the faculty through that, but I really knew very little about Grace, even though I grew up in the area. Mike and Carrie Yoakum at the time were, and they're still good friends of ours, but they were friends and I knew they were both here. And one spring, they asked if I would come over and consider talking about a position. And so I actually had lost a student that evening on the bus in a rainstorm. So after I found the student and we got him back home, I came to Grace, and it was not anything I had ever thought of. And sometimes I still can't believe that I moved to this age group. But I said kindergarten and first year college students, they both miss their mom and they both need hugs and they both need snacks. So it's very similar to kindergarten. So I just realized they're just kids as well that need attention and love and care. Yeah.
So did you come first to Grace then as a faculty member?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, started that following fall in the School of Education.
Okay. And taught for how many years before you transitioned then to
10. Yeah, 9.
Dean?
It was my 10th year.
Okay, your 10th year you transitioned to dean. Okay, so now we're getting into the kind of leadership part of this. You've kind of been on the front lines, teaching, classroom, all of that, and you still do that as a dean. But what made you decide, I'm going to make this leap into a really important leadership role on campus? Were you coerced or did you? Okay.
I don't know. What do I say? No. No, I was actually it again was not something I'd consider. I don't see myself having, I guess I don't see some of the skill sets that are required in the job. I don't see myself as having some of those. So when I was first asked to do it, I really struggled with the decision. I loved my team and I was in like a perfect world, right? I loved what I was doing. I loved my students. I loved the extras I was able to do on campus. But I also have always believed that when someone in leadership that you trust and value, ask you to try something. And I totally believed I was just trying it. I never felt like if I didn't make the decision, something would happen, or if I didn't like it, I couldn't go back. I never felt like that. I always felt like it was a genuine offer to come and try this on for a while. So
when you think of your 10 years as dean, I have a couple questions here I want to ask, but what would you say was your emphasis, or we kind of look back on the Dr. Owen era as dean?
Oh my!
What would they say was kind of this was the direction she led during that 10-year period that was really important?
I think because I was coming out of the public schools and the connection with Grace, I think I followed maybe Ron Manahan, who was my president, his passion about community connection. I was relatively surprised when I got invited to come here that there was this full school of ed and that it was actually graduating all these teachers. And there was not a lot of connection between the school systems and Grace at that time. So I think probably under his wing or under his shadow, maybe even, I felt very, very driven to connect those populations. I love the schools I taught in. I valued those opportunities and the leadership there, and so it seemed very natural to bring those two together. So I would say that that's probably one of the things when when you look back and go, ooh, what did you think you did well, right? I think that the School of Education, now it's not just me. I mean, there's an incredible team over there, but we were able to really get in partnership, call ourselves true partners with the local schools.
As somebody who moved into the community and didn't even work at Grace when I first moved to the community, you quickly saw that tie between the local local school systems and Grace College. I mean, we almost literally have an elementary school on our campus.
And yeah, lots of local administrators are grads now, so they feel like my children, right? And then several teachers. I can't go into a building that there's not grads there, so that's so exciting.
That's been our experience with our kids. It's like, who's your teacher this year? Oh, she's a Grace grad. He's a Grace grad. You know, that's been that principal's a Grace grad. Interesting.
But I will say I don't think they feel like they owe us in the partnership. I think they respect and value the quality that team. I mean, I'm not in charge anymore, but it's still the quality of the program is outstanding. So yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your leadership style, how you would describe, because now you're moving into an even more significant role. It has become more permanent here in the last 6 or so months, being named full-time as the VP of Academic Affairs and overseeing all faculty. Tell us a little bit kind of about your leadership style and what that looks like.
Well, it probably just mirrors my teaching style, I guess, because that was a leadership role in a different format, but highly relational. I want to know the people that I work with and kind of know what makes them tick, so I feed off relationship. Also, more of the kind of guide on the side, like walking along. I like to watch others succeed. It just brings me great joy to see other people thrive. So that's how I taught, and I hope that's how people think that I lead, care deeply about them and want them to be successful.
What's that looked like for you? And one of the interesting things about your leadership as the Vice President of Academic Affairs is when you kind of entered this in the midst of this COVID time where, being a highly relational person and then everything's Zoom and not in person. How have you navigated that for yourself, trying to lead the way that's natural for you, but in an environment that's not normal?
I think the transition, had I have not had 10 years in the relationships that I had before COVID, I probably would not have been successful. I don't think, but because I had built those relationships, those were easier to continue via Zoom or a good phone call. At the same time, I moved into a multi-generational home, so maybe God was just protecting me for too many relationships at that time. So, but I never felt, I was frustrated because I'm a big hugger, right? And I like that physical connection with people, but I don't feel like relationship-wise, I feel like faculty stepped up and did what they needed to do, and in all sorts of ways, which included keeping me informed and letting me be part of what was happening every day. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned here, and I have to read it because, I need to know exactly what this means and don't want to do it incorrectly, but you talked about one of your priorities now in this new role is to really think about designing and implementing effective faculty development opportunities. What does that mean, and what does that look like?
It means giving educators, classroom teachers, more tools in their tool belt to teach effectively this generation. So some of that's technology, some of that's just teaching strategy, some even just, I guess, proximity with students. There's several things when you go through an education program called pedagogy, right? That the art of teaching that you pick up on. I did not realize until I started at Grace that the majority of faculty don't have a teaching degree. That was new to me when I came here. So I was surprised by that. And people have been so kind and have, kind of invited me. And I know I worked with Tom Edgington and the behavioral science department, but trying to do more classroom strategies to be really intentional about, learning modalities and differences. And so I think that's what it means. It means giving faculty tools that they can practice. So I was a little surprised at the college level. Faculty development felt more philosophical. And, granted, we are college, but I thought, okay, that's important, but we're a teaching college. And it's important when we start saying our students are going to be with us 2 hours and 20 minutes, that it's well worth their time, right, to be with us 2 hours and 20 minutes. And part of that's just keeping them engaged. So it's helping faculty feel more equipped to do that part of their job.
That's great. So that in-person teaching experience, how do we make it great for students? And I've never really thought about that myself. I mean, so many of our faculty are amazingly qualified with wonderful degrees from wonderful institutions in specific disciplines, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they've spent much time in a classroom teaching.
And that could be a long 2 hour and 20 minute time frame.
Yes, I can imagine.
So I think it's just taking again what I was raised doing, right? That kind of 20-20-10 philosophy where you have 20 minutes of content, 20 minutes of engagement and activity, and kind of 10 minutes of practice. So that's how we teach education majors. So it feels like another step, I guess, in that process. That if that's the way God equipped me and skilled and gifted me, I want to be able to use that wisely at this level too.
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's great. I do want to hit on something you mentioned, multi-generational family. Now,
yes.
Interestingly enough, your parents were my neighbors.
They were.
Till they sold their house just recently, and they moved in with you, and a bunch of other people moved in with you. So that is sort of an interesting part of your story, and something I find fascinating about you is kind of this, your life and your home are, open books. Your home's a revolving door. So tell us a little bit about what's your current family living situation look like, and why is that valuable to you?
Okay. Well, like you said, my parents were your neighbors, and then we lived 4-5 doors down, right? And
that was too far, apparently.
It was. Well, it wasn't. But it was. I feel so blessed. I mean, how many really people my age have both their parents still alive and actively part of their lives, right? So I felt very blessed by that. I have always had a very connected family. My children are very connected. My foster children are so very connected with me. And so it was valuable to me to keep that connection. My siblings have both kind of moved into other areas, and I've always felt sad for them a little bit, and more importantly for their children. I think if you'd ask any of my children, like, who are your best friends? I'd be, grandma and grandpa, right? And they've always had a great relationship. So it got to where it was really hard to be down at the house with all of these people. Like you said, you never really know who's going to be living there at what time, but all of these people and all of this excitement and fun, and they were 4 doors down, and yet it was difficult for them in their current health situation to come and just enjoy, right? Mom needed handicapped accessible areas, and our house really wasn't. Our pool area at that time really wasn't. So it really, I struggled. And then every time I go down there, I always felt like I didn't want to leave. Like I felt like, man, this is really important, special time. So we joked with my dad, and my dad, he's a bit of an old curmudgeon, right? So we joked with him a lot for years about, why don't you just buy a house we can all live together? And he'd, mumble and rah, rah, rah. And then one day, right before COVID hit, but one day he just said, well, have you been looking at any houses? And so we just took off and found a perfect home that has 3 kind of homes stacked on top of each other, and that's where we moved in.
Okay, so it's your parents.
Mm-hmm. So there's 11 of us right now.
11 in the house.
And we range from 8 weeks to 87. And then the 12th is due maybe Wednesday. And so we'll have a newborn. Not that the 8 weeks not really newborn, but no.
Now it's one family unit, but there's a whole myriad. And as you said, your life's kind of your house is kind of a revolving door where it may be 11 today, 13 tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One of the things that I have also found, I'm just a little bit more of this kind of person, and you're able to live very comfortably amidst the chaos. Mm-hmm. And you're also extremely intentional about having fun, about creating memories with your family, and including, and like you even said, grandkids, being best friends with grandparents. Give us some practical, I may never become Laurie Owen in that regard.
People will be thankful you don't know.
But I want to get better at, how do I create memories? And I remember one of my uncle telling me once, memories take work. Mm-hmm. They don't just happen. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things or principles or ideas that you kind of live by to create that close family dynamic?
Wow. Because I just want to say, I think so much of it is just your family culture, right? When I grew up in Anderson, my grandparents were very influential in community, and every Christmas Eve, 30, 40 people in the community at our house, and their lake home was kind of open like that. My parents, I grew up in one of those homes. It was never perfect. It was never beautiful, and fancy, but everybody felt welcome there, that my parents were kind of everyone's parents, and so that it just became a part of who I guess I am. I think people can learn how to open their doors, but you have to open your heart first. And some of that is you have to give up what other people think about you or about the choices that you make. I still daily have people that are very special to me that I love dearly not understand choices that I make, because this makes more sense, or this seems like it would be hurtful, or this would seem this way or that way. But you just have to, you just have to do what's best in your heart. I think that's when those memories happen. We don't do a lot of extravagant things as family, but we do crazy dinners and murder mysteries, and we just get together a lot, and we're very comfortable with one another. And I think from that, the real relationships flow. It doesn't feel like work to me. Now, every birthday party is work because we're all teachers, so they have to be a theme, right? You have to have theme everything. But genuinely, I love their company. I will be so glad when COVID is over and all of us can get back together in kind of one area. So I think it's kind of listening to others, their interest. I don't enjoy everything that we do as a collective group, but it's just the joy of watching other people have fun. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Well, you got the quote of the day right there. If you're going to open your doors, you first have to open your heart.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good, you'll be okay with letting people into the mess if your heart is open to allowing them into the mess, and they will be more comfortable to share their own sort of messiness as you kind of say.
That's what family
hey,
is, right? It's not really blood. It's not really birth order. It's just kind of mess that you walk through together and you laugh a lot and
So, and speaking of not blood, I mean, your family, again, because you've had that sort of mentality, your family's been unique in, you mentioned foster care, which I think you've done that like true foster care, and you've done sort of
pretend
you're living with me for a couple weeks, or you're hanging. So tell us a little bit about how some of those things have happened. What's that look like? I mean, if you have a story or two to tell, that'd be great to kind of exemplify it. But I find that to be, sometimes we think it's got to be this formal thing or, this permanent thing, but for you, it's been kind of all of the above.
Very, very organic. Yes. Well, it did start, I guess it did start, quote, formal with the foster system, but we even did that backwards. It was interesting that just a group of people started talking to us about a situation that they were aware of. And because of that, I kind of stepped into the mess, right? That's what you do. And we ended up foster parenting officially. But so we were licensed all backwards. We had this. And so everything in the classes, they'd say like, never foster children older than your own. And these are old. I'm like, oh, well, we're doing everything wrong so far. But we learned about the system. And I think that was really good for me as an educator to learn about that system, because we're so critical of that system at times. And yet to see how hard these men and women are working and how understaffed they really are, and the incredible weight that they carry. It was good to learn about the system. It was hard to know ultimately the whole point of fostering is to get those people, that original family back together. That was really hard sometimes and difficult to process. But it was all preparing me, not me. God was preparing me for what would someday turn into an adoption, a foster to adopt situation, because all of those life lessons helped me hear things differently when they were said to me by my adopted son, or when we talked about certain things. I had that clinical background, I guess, to try to process some of that. It's still been a great learning curve. But other than that, I have I have a beautiful daughter named Nina that just out of bizarre kind of culture circumstances ended up living with us, and she's delightful, and I love her dearly, and she'll always be my daughter. And so now I'm best friends with
Grad and
her.
A teacher.
We have she is a teacher.
Yeah.
I'd have had students from Grace live with me for different reasons, and so now they're still all my daughters, and all their babies are my grandboys, and so I think a lot of it's just, like I said, you just open the door because somebody needs some place to be.
Would you say you kind of became known as a person who was willing to take on hard things, and therefore those hard things kind of found you at times?
Or was I just looking for them?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I'm known to do hard things. I think I'm known, it's probably more of just the overall open attitude to everything. I guess people have called me like, oh, you're so transparent, because I have things in my background I'm not proud of, and I wish I could go back and change, but I didn't. So by being a little bit more honest about some of those situations, that's, I think, how God uses you to naturally or organically come into some of these relationships and really mentor. So I just remember when I first started at Grace, if people ask questions, I'd tell them right now, oh, you're so transparent. I didn't even know what it meant, really. But I thought, no, it's just, my goodness, if I can live that with someone, if I can stand beside someone who's going through that now and say, I wish I would have or could have, why wouldn't I, share those experiences? So
that's a wonderful testimony as well, just to be open with the good, the bad, and that God can take all of it and bring it together to make us more like Christ. And then he really wants to use that for us to be able to share his love with others.
That's right.
So thank you for the way that you have lived that out on our campus. And we are excited for you even in this new role. I don't know, is it still new anymore? I mean,
well, I think it'll be new after COVID.
That's true.
I think I'll finally figure out what it is when COVID's over and we're all back on campus again. I do. I think I freak students out now because in my new office, I'm not as, my proximity with students has definitely changed, right, in the last few months. So if I see any of them out in the hall, I tend to go after them. You want some candy? Do you want to come in and sit down on the couch? So I've got a couple students now that are visiting regularly, so that's good. Yeah, I get some kid breath back in the office.
I can see how that, you've had that and you love it, and it's kind of changed.
Yeah. But it's opening up freshman year experience. I'm excited to be working with them again in the fall, and that's something I haven't been able to do as my role as dean. So I'm finding ways to still be with them. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing your time, and thank you for sharing some of your story with us.
My pleasure.
And thank you for all of you listening to the Grace Story podcast today. Music was written and produced by Dr. Wally Brath, Assistant Professor of Worship Arts at Grace College. Thanks also to Andrew Palladino and Rick Neer for serving as our producers. And if you could do us a huge favor and rate and comment on this podcast wherever you retrieved it from, we would be so grateful. Until next time, live your best grace story today.